Hi, in the previous session, we promised to speak about faith. To begin a series on faith, in explaining what faith is and how it works for man and its relationship with God. Now, faith. What is faith? Faith is the face of God. Faith is the face of God in the sense that God has more than one face. God has several faces. If love was one face, then faith is another face. There is judgment as well as mercy. And then to envision God and his faces, let's take a look at Ezekiel chapter 1 verse 10 to give us a context of God and faces, having more than face. That is God. Remember, in our beginning series, in the very first transmission we ever released, we mentioned that God is a system. God is many, but he still is one. And we said God or Jehovah is a singular name for a plural being. So as we go on, we are understanding God in his broader aspect. It's not like he might have deposited all the knowledge or his knowledge unto me, but we have ministers, many of them, and many are explaining. But I have a responsibility to say what he has revealed to me. Now, coming back to the what we are talking about, faith is the face of God. Ezekiel chapter 1, we are going to read verse 10 again alone, because in this chapter, in this beginning of the book of Ezekiel, Ezekiel is explaining to the nation of Israel, God having revealed to him leaving Israel, his glory, him and his glory leaving Israel. So let's read verse 10, the picture of God as Ezekiel gave it, what he saw. And verse 10, and he has been, all the way from verse 1, he has been describing about God, what he saw. And so in verse 10, he said, as for the likeness of their faces, each had the face of a man, each of the four had the face of a lion. On the right side, each of the four had the face of an ox. On the left side, each of the four had the face of an eagle. So he saw creatures, certain creatures, but those creatures represented God, as we said earlier, God is many. But each creature, a single creature, had several faces. That will be a single spiritual creature, a being has more than one face. So it's in that context that we are speaking about faith being one face of God. Faith is a face of God. It's almost the most important face of God, but faith is a face of God. Love is another face of God, and then we have judgment is also a face of God. And then we have the face of mercy. So faith is a face of God. That's one statement we have made. Along the series, as we are going on, we are going to explain further in the subsequent transmissions. Two, the second statement about faith is Jesus Christ. Faith is Jesus Christ. So you see, I'm tying God and Jesus Christ to one thing. Faith is the face of God, but faith is also Jesus Christ. How? In creation, as you understand, God was just saying, let there be, and there became. Let there be this. On another day, let there be this, and there became. And then, as God has been giving us his word along the way, from the Genesis now, in the continuation, he came to explain, to make us understand, and come to knowledge that that is faith. Just speaking, and it becomes. That is faith. That power is the power of faith. And so, if in creation God just said, and it became, and then in John chapter 1, verse 3, Again, the same word tells us that everything was created through Jesus Christ. Step one, everything was created by faith or through faith. Now, step two, everything was created through Jesus Christ. Genesis, we do not need to read because almost everybody knows that. However, for John, we might as well make a reference. John chapter 1, verse 3. John chapter 1, verse 3, about God and creation. John chapter 1, verse 3. And this is what it reads. All things were made through him, and without him nothing was made that was made. That nothing was that was made. So you see, creation is done through faith, and then creation, by the same word, creation is also done through Jesus Christ. So Jesus Christ is one and the same. Maybe we have to back up that point, and that is in Hebrews 11:6 that speaks about faith. That's the chapter that keeps speaking about faith. Hebrews chapter 11 verse 6. What does Hebrews chapter 11 verse 6 say about faith? Verse 6 says, but without faith it is impossible to please God. For he who comes to God must believe that he is, and that he is a rewarder of those who diligently seek him. It is impossible to please God. That's only faith pleases God. So why did we read there? Because of what is written in John chapter 12. John chapter 12, verse 28. John chapter 12, verse 28. Is it John? Is it 12? John chapter 12, verse 28. So that what is written there, it's still about the same faith. John 12, 28. Now, John chapter 12, verse 28, this is what it says. Father, glorify your name. That's when Jesus was being was speaking about himself. So he said somewhere, Father, glorify your name. And then a voice came from heaven saying, I have both glorified it and will glorify it. That's actually not what we were looking for. That's what we are looking for is in Matthew chapter 3 verse 17. Matthew chapter 3 verse 17. Because what we read has to be in relationship with what we are reading now. Matthew chapter 3 verse 17. My page is God. My son took away with my page. This is what it says. This is my son. A voice came from heaven and said, this is my son by whom I am well pleased. That's what we are looking for. So if faith pleases God, because without faith it's impossible to please God, and then God in Matthew chapter 3 verse 17 he says, this is my son whom I am well pleased with. So faith pleases God, and then Jesus also pleases God. So faith and Jesus are not different. They're actually one and the same, or they're pretty much alike. In Galatians chapter 3 verse 23, in Galatians chapter 3 verse 23, where we are speaking about the law. In Galatians chapter 3 verse 23, when we are speaking about the law, and we find that the law, faith was responsible for the end of the law. Galatians chapter 3 verse 23. This is what it reads. But before faith came, we were kept under guard by the law, kept for the faith which would afterward be revealed. Before faith came, we were kept under guard by the law. So it's faith that had to come for us not to be under the law anymore. Now, Hebrews Hebrews 10:4. Hebrews 10, chapter 10, verse 4. What does Hebrews 10:4 tell us? Hebrews chapter 10, verse 4. Actually, it's Romans chapter 10, verse 4. It's Romans chapter 10, verse 4, which tells us how the law came to an end and not Hebrews. Romans chapter 10, verse 4, and this is what it reads. Romans chapter 10, verse 4. For Christ is the end of the law for righteousness to everyone who believes. If you believe, if you have faith, then Christ is the end of the law for you. But Galatians said, before faith came, we were under the law. So according to Galatians, we were still under the law until the coming of faith. But it's Christ who had to come for us not to be under the law any longer. So, if Christ brought an end to the law for us, but still the word identifies faith as what brought an end to the law for us, then Christ and the law are one and the same. So we began by saying faith, what is the face of God? 2, faith is Jesus Christ. So faith being the face of God and love also being the face of God, faith and love has a very close relationship. Because they are the faces of the same entity or the same being. In fact, one confirms the existence of the other, or one complements the existence of the other. Without faith, it is impossible to please God. Without faith, it is impossible to please God. Remember what we said earlier in the previous transmission. We said, whom you love, you please. Whom you love, you please. It's whom you care about. It's whom you want to have the best. That's the one you please. So faith confirms your love for God. Because to please God, you have to have faith. So faith confirms your love for God. And therefore, if whom you love you please, then that love confirms the existence of faith. It's that love, actually God is love. It is that love that confirms the existence of faith. So, my brethren, we had to handle a certain duty or responsibility somewhere else, and then we started this series because it's going to be ongoing. Faith is also wide, and until the next transmission, when we shall be qualifying many of the statements about faith, because faith is really basic in relationship with God. So until the next transmission, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon.